So recently I came across a problem that I have a lot, which is I read this book that I absolutely loved, and I read it in about 12 hours, and it's been about 20 days and I haven't written a review. And I think that this comes off a lot because of the fact that there are books that I absolutely adore, and I feel like I can never explain how much I love them in mere words, and also it feels like if I do, it'll just kind of like open my heart and reveal my deepest secrets. So this one was Lester by Raven Lalanny. This is a book that came out in 2020 and is about this woman who is Black and living in New York. She's 23 years old. She works in publishing, and her name is mentioned once to be Edith and once as Edie, and other than that, we know very little about her. It's very stream of consciousness. It's very immersive, which are a lot of these books that I relate to a lot, are books that allow us to be very close in someone's mental health and very close in their experiences. She is in an affair with a man who is 23 years older than her, and it is very toxic.
When I get up in the morning, I look in the mirror and I see only my mother's face. A remnant of a dream I'm still half inside. This morning, I look in the mirror and find a bruise that makes the resemblance more pronounced.
The anxiety is rising already because I am so stressed about talking about these books because this is a group of, I don't know, like 10 books. I just kind of wrote down the books that I thought about that are my favorite books, which I just can't ever express, and these are a group of them. So yeah, Lester is a book that I love so much. I love how close we are to the main character. I love that it's stream of consciousness. I love that it really dives into mental health. Part of it is the insecurity that if I talk about how much I love this book, then it seems like this is autobiographical, like that I've slept or had a relationship with like a man who is twice my age, which is not the case, but it's more about the issues around it, the issues of how she feels as a woman, how she feels and relates to the world, and her relationship with the wife of the man she's having an affair with. He has an open relationship, so the wife is aware that he is sleeping with other people, but like there's some interesting conversations, and there's interesting conversations about race and stuff like that. Also, do I have a right to claim how much I love this, because it's very much about a Black woman, but I even wrote a thing to the author being like, this is so poignant and amazing, and like spoke so much to the threads of trauma that speaks through women's lives, and it means so much to me, and I still can't write a review for it.
A way is always made to document how we manage to survive, or in some cases, how we don't. So I've tried to reproduce an inscrutable thing. I've made my own hunger into practice, made everyone who passes through my life subject to a close and inappropriate reading that occasionally finds its way, often insufficiently, into paint. And when I am alone with myself, this is what I am waiting for someone to do with me, with merciless, deliberate hands to put me down onto the canvas so that when I am gone, there will be a record, a proof that I was here.
So I still have not filmed my May wrap-up because I can't talk about this book. This is Three Girls in Brooklyn, and this is about this family in the early 1900s. It's published in 1940, and it's kind of autobiographical by Betty Smith, and it is a story about her family. I really related to her parents more than anything, though. I really related to how much they have the story of characters who really love each other but have such a problematic relationship. Her father is an alcoholic, and he has all of these dreams, but he's not depicted as a man who has no love or a man who has no redemption. I love the relationship between her mother and her father, and how about the fact that her mother loves her father despite the fact that, you know, he's an alcoholic, despite the fact that he gambles and uses a bunch of the money that they need for their family. And that love is so evident.
She exchanged her tenderness for capability. She gave up her dreams and took on hard realities in their place. Katie had a fierce desire for survival, which made her a fighter. Johnny had a hankering over immortality, which made him a useless dreamer. And that was the great difference between these two who loved each other so well.
Her growing up and like wanting to tell these stories, and the person literally telling her to burn her work because it's not pretty and it's not beautiful, and like it's not what women should be writing about, and or like, you know, they're like, write nice stories, and I'm like, no. I relate to it so much. I also really related to the mother, and she talks a lot about the fact that she has to, there's this line that I really love through that talks about the mother, that she, you know, gave away the compassion and love in her heart to be what some people call character. And as someone who has lived with trauma, that is such a relatable thing, that it can be really hard to hold on to love. It can be really hard, and that it can give away to character, and that it's so well written. Like, there's so many things, that the fact that there's this metaphor of this tree throughout, just because something is dirty or seen to be sick or something like that does not mean that it's not beautiful. It does not mean that the love is not there. And I love how funny and hilarious it is. It is great, and I love the ant so much. It is just a book that I know why a lot of people wouldn't like it, but I relate to the writing. I relate to the coming of age, the sacrifice, the growing up in a family where there's a lot of love, but there's also a lot of hurt, the sacrifice that means for that. And I love it so much.
This tree in the yard, this tree that men had chopped down, this tree that had built a bonfire around, trying to burn up the stump, this tree, it lived, and nothing could destroy it.
The Bell Jar is a book that I've talked a lot about, but I still struggle because it's a book that I feel very represented in. And this is a 1964 novel that really talks about what it means to have depression and what it means to experience that. And I always quote two parts of it. In the beginning is her sitting and not like talking about the hullaboo and the fact that she should feel excited, that she should feel joy, but she just can't give herself the energy.
I guess I should be excited, the way most of the other girls were, but I couldn't get myself to react. I felt very still and very empty, the way that Eye of the Tornado must feel, moving dully along in the middle of the surrounding hullabaloo.
I've often explained my own depression, like feeling like I'm in a black and white room where everyone else is seeing color and being like, why aren't you like noticing the color? Like we're walking in, I was gonna say Wonderland, we're walking in Oz and you're not seeing the fact that everything has changed to color. And I'm like, I just can't render that much excitement. And I really feel that in Esther Greenwood. And then at the end, she really has this line about the fact that having mental health is feeling like the bell jar is always around it. So the bell jar is a metaphor for mental health, the fact that it can literally come into us and the fact that you can feel trapped in it. And it's one of those beautiful, beautiful jars, but that can be very trapped. And the fact that it always feels like it's right above you and you don't know when it's going to descend. And as someone who was very healthy for quite a few years and then has had a lot worse mental health in last year, that can be really relatable, just to feel like I was doing so well and then it came back and like I don't know and I can't explain why my mental health is worse than it was like a year ago, but it is.
How did I know that someday at college, in Europe, somewhere, anywhere, the bell jar, with its stifling distortions, wouldn't descend again?
Next one is Other Words for Home. This is a book that I wrote 4 pages of notes on and still have never been able to articulate. It's just a really powerful story. This is one that is not autobiographical or I really feel myself in, but that just matters a lot to me. And it's a story about this girl who lives in Syria and is a refugee and comes to live in Seattle and her experience there. And it's just so well written. She writes it in poems.
For everyone who is made to feel like a side character in their own story.
The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein by Kirsten White is one of the first novels that I ever saw really someone like me who is very logical, who has dealt with abuse and has dealt with trauma and has learned to kind of make themselves adaptable to other people. And so often we see women who have to choose to be strong by being very vocal, by being very outspoken. And she's all very good at being like, okay, I'm going to make myself more compatible or more gentle or more whatever in order to calm down someone. I had someone a few years ago who I have a difficult relationship with say to me, you know, you've learned really well how to speak to me. Like you used to be really, you know, abrasive and much more like outspoken and annoying, and now you're not. And I'm like, yeah, great. I'm glad that I've had to adapt to be the kind of person that you want. And you realize that you haven't done the same to me. I have learned how to listen to you, but you've never learned to listen to me. I feel like a big part of growing up as a woman and growing up as a person who isn't always given a good voice is learning how to become peaceful. I have a lot of very strong opinions, but I also know that I know when to mold myself into a person that is acceptable to another person.
So I'm talking a lot about like women molding themselves into things that are like pleasant or wonderful or that people would like. And by that, I'm not saying that women should do this. I'm saying that in a lot of situations, women have to do this. And that can also be applicable to lots of other people in dangerous and or, you know, places where they are not given a voice or given thoughts and things like that. And that sometimes it also doesn't have to be a giving up of power to do that. Like sometimes you have a situation where you can't escape or that you can't get out of this. There is an immediate way that you can be safe. And then sometimes, you know, I'm a little bit of a Slytherin and I believe that cunning and wisdom can sometimes get you a little bit farther than, you know, being outspoken. And that does not mean that you are giving up those thoughts. It means that you're choosing to use your whole arsenal. But in the situation with Elizabeth, she is dealing with Victor Frankenstein, who is much more aggressive. Like he's definitely very aggressive in the original, but here he is, you know, quite violent. And she knows that if she, you know, objects to the fact that he is hurting other people, she will become one of the hurt people, which again, she should advocate for that, but she also needs power for him to lessen other people's pain. And it becomes a very complicated situation where by giving up some of her power and presenting more passively does she actually have more power over him? Those are a lot of conversations that I have with myself about how do I present myself? How do I use both the ability to be very outspoken, but also to be someone who can nod and agree and then influence someone a little bit more through that.
I like her because she's really intelligent, but she has also learned how to hide that intelligence and to mold herself into a person that other people like. And that doesn't make her unfeminist. That makes her experience the experience of what a lot of women feel. Becoming by Michelle Obama is a book that I have so many feelings about. I feel like I forget them. It is a book that just, I cried through a lot of it. And she does such a evocative one to talk about so many issues of being a woman, also being Black, and so many other things. My Dark Vanessa is a book that I really, really enjoy in a way that it was really hard, but very, very beautiful. It deals with a girl who's 15 years old and is groomed and assaulted and made to believe that the relationship with her 42-year-old teacher is consensual and healthy, and her love, and the way men interact with girls, the way men interact with minors, the way that, you know, women are treated, young women and just women in general, the way that, you know, you're manipulated slyly in relationships and being like, no, no, you wanted this. No, no, this is your fault. No, you're making me desire you, rather than speaking it. It is all so subtly done. And it's experience that, you know, I've been in and I've seen so many of my friends, and it's one that I feel very hard to explain how much it matters to me. Una Out of Order by Margarita Monitor is a book that is way underrated and is about this girl who, from her 18th birthday on, flips through the years. So she spends every year at a different age, but she's chronologically growing older in her mind at a different rate. So she is 18 and then she's 52 and then she jumps into her late 20s and all of this. And it's really about finding your place and the fact that no matter where she is, people are going to be gone because they either died, they're not born yet, or she doesn't know them. And like the experience of that is so beautiful. As someone who has chronic health, as someone who, you know, has left its situations or yearns for other ones to come, it is very understandable and beautiful to read this book that is really about time and how we can't control life, and that it's very unpredictable, and that sometimes we don't recognize ourselves in the mirror, but also being okay with growth, being okay with change, being okay with the fact that life isn't always going to look that way. And it's just, I wrote one of my longest reviews to this and I will link it below, but it's a book that I still struggle to articulate everything that it means to me.
Una was still learning every time she leaped. No matter the year, someone important would be absent from her life. Every year, bittersweet. But it would be okay. There would be bad days, there always would. But she'd collect these good days, each one illuminated, and string them together until they glowed brightly in her memory.
Dear Edward is kind of cut into, we have this boy who is growing up in this small rural town, and he is doing this after his entire family, as well as everyone on this plane crash, died. It's based on a real plane crash, but it's fictionalized people, and pretty much he is a 12-year-old boy, and he's the only survivor. And it really deals with his experience of that, him growing up and being a teenager, and the experiences of trauma, the experiences, and also we see all of these people on the plane, and she does such a good job of making us so invested in these stories that will never end. Like, you know, they're never going to get off this plane. Like, they're stressed, they're anxious, they're, you know, they might be pregnant, this person wants to come out. Never going to be able to do those things, and yet we're still invested in them happening. And Edward as a character is dealing with quiet trauma. He's dealing with the aftershocks of what it means to be a person who's living with this entire amount of grief. And it's really a story about him embracing that and going over that and helping other people through it. And the way that it deals with trauma and PTSD is one of the best I've ever seen. Sometimes I can talk about these books, but I always feel inadequate. I always feel incomplete. Like I can never fully express the amount of passion and the amount of evocativeness and poignancy and impact that these books had on me. Transcendent Kingdom is also a book that I absolutely loved. It is one of the 5 stars at the end of last year, and I sometimes am regretful of books at the end of the year because I sometimes feel like they don't get as much things because I tend to move on to the new books in January, and this was a book in December, and I never did my wrap up because I didn't know how to talk about this book. But this is a book that really deals with this girl who's growing up and her experience of family. Her brother deals with addiction. She is dealing with a crisis of faith, of what it looks like for her to be a woman of faith, a woman in science, and she's gone into neuroscience to kind of understand what is going on in her family, but she still feels very incomplete to talk about it. I just feel inadequate to explain what a powerful book it is. The Smell of People's Houses is one of the first books on here that I really read that I made a review for, and it's all cringy and all of that, but the thing is, I don't remember the exact quote, but the basis of it is, I still have my heart cobbled together and a little less for wear, but it's not completely out. And the ending part is wrong, I know that, but it's a book that is just so powerful. As someone who is in the depths of depression and exhaustion and PTSD at the time, to just feel like the fact that my heart could go on, even though it was less for wear, even though it was broken and hurting and cobbled together, that it was still powerful. This is a collection of kind of short stories interweaving things about these 5 people who live in this town and their stories in this 1970s Alaska. And I need to reread it, but it was very powerful to me at the time.
It suddenly dawned on me there's a big difference between feeling tired and being weak. It's still there, my own heart, cobbled together and a little worse for wear, but it's definitely not all beat out.
Conversations with Friends is the last book that I'll talk about on here for now. It's a book that I read twice in April, and I still struggle to talk about it. It is kind of similar to Lester in the fact that it deals with this woman who is like 20, 21, having an affair with an older man. And I don't know why I relate to this, because I have no desire whatsoever to have an affair with an older man, and yet I feel like the way that authors use this to explore femininity and explore the way that women are made to feel in their bodies and insecurity and mental health really speaks to me, even though it's a situation I would never want. And, Lester says, how often have I made gods out of feeble men? And this is a good explanation of that, where we're really just exploring her mental health and what she feels like as a woman. And the big part that speaks, the novel was already speaking so much to me, but then we deal with endometriosis, which is an issue with fertility. It's not the one I have PCOS, but the experience of what it means to have really painful periods, which people don't know and aren't really explaining, and then to be told at 21 that you're never going to be able to have kids is terrifying. I had it happen when I was 19, and her experience of just feeling like not like a woman, and she's like, I'm not sure I even want kids. But the fact that I might not be able to have kids just feels so incredibly invasive and like unwomifying. Like I feel really inadequate. And those experience of it is something that really spoke to me, and just the closeness and the powerfulness of it. I find it very interesting, because I normally prefer third person omniscient point of views, but the books that kind of feel like autofiction, that are incredibly close, stream of consciousness, first person, when we're not even like really given the characters' names, are books that I also really relate to, because I relate to how much the mental health feels. And even if their lives are so different from me, I feel very close to them, and I feel very relatable, because the intense yet poignant written books are so beautiful. I don't know if this video will be going up on my channel, because it's a lot and just very vulnerable, and me talking about everything, but it's a video that I wanted to make, and if it goes up on time, it will be up on my birthday, so I feel like this is an adequate book to do for this. And happy reading and writing, and I will talk to you next time. Let me know which books feels incredibly vulnerable, evocative, and hard to explain for you.